Located east of downtown Dallas, Fair Park covers a vast area of 277 acres. It contains the world's largest collection of Art Deco through its many murals, paintings, and sculptures, which were made possible by federal funding for the Texas Centennial. The National Historic Landmark also has 3 museums, an aquarium, a music hall, and a football stadium. Although Fair Park hosts a large number of festivals, most of them coinciding with national holidays, the most famous event is the State Fair of Texas. It boasts an annual attendance of 3 million and is the only one to have an automobile show. Starting in late September and ending in the middle of October, it is responsible for the birth of Fair Park. The whole thing started in August 1885. Frank Holland, the owner of the Texas Farm and Ranch Publishing Company, came up with the idea of having a state fair which would celebrate the city's history and development. Holland and those who liked the proposal were heavily influenced by all the state expositions taking place throughout the nation at the time. In addition to attracting more visitors and new residents, they wanted to use the event to spark business and trade opportunities. During the early part of January in 1886, a group of prominent citizens gathered to form a private corporation called the Dallas State Fair Association. The charter was signed on January 30, 1886. On March 25th, the company directors assembled together to determine where the state fair would be located. Those attending had to choose between the Cole property and the Gaston property. Located in North Dallas, the first option consisted of 90 acres of farmland owned by Jack Cole, the first surveyor of Dallas County. The second option came in the form of an offer from William Gaston. He had recently purchased land which was once the property of John Grigsby and Thomas Ligo, veterans of the Texas Revolution, who had received the prairie land in recognition of their service. The gift, located in the town of East Dallas, at the current location of Fair Park, was later divided into sections and sold to various individuals. Gaston managed to obtain 80 acres of the land and offered it to the association in exchange for stock valued at $14,000. When it came time to vote on the matter, 6 directors chose the Gaston property while 3 picked the Cole property. A large number of stockholders, mostly manufacturers and dealers in farm equipment, voiced strong opposition to the decision. Led by C.A. Keating, the opposition claimed that Cole's farmland was more superior in quality and price than Gaston's prairie land. The attacks continued until the leaders agreed to allow the stockholders to voice their complaints on April 17th. A committee of appeals heard the opposition's case but declined to overturn the decision because there was no proof that the Gaston property was unsuitable for staging a fair. Despite assurances that the manufacturers and dealers would get top-quality space for their exhibits, the members refused to be satisfied and started making plans for their own fair. Keating resigned to lead the group with the support of Jewel N. Schneider, Oliver Bowser, and Frank Holland. They sent a request for a state charter. The end result was the formation of the Texas State Fair and Exposition. Taking place on the Cole property in North Dallas, the fair would last from October 25th to October 31st. Its main highlights included horse racing, hot air balloon shows, and local exhibits. While this was going on, the other organization hosted its fair at the current location of Fair Park. Starting on the day after the first festival began, the Dallas State Fair lasted until November 6th. It had the same highlights as its competitor with the exception of ceremonial dance performances by Native Americans. Both events were extremely successful, averaging a total of 35,000 visitors a day. However, the attendance barely offset the expenses. The two sides decided it would be beneficial for them to merge together and host only one fair in Dallas. The merger officially took place on Valentine's Day, the following year with the adoption of a new charter. Now called the Texas State Fair and Dallas Exposition, the members decided to host the event on the Gaston property. When December arrived, officials bought additional land and increased the size to 120 acres. They changed the organization's name to the Texas State Fair 12 years later in 1899. All was going well until the Texas legislature passed a law in 1903 that banned horse race gambling, the fair's main source of income. With no way to finance the festival, the organization decided to give the land to Dallas as a way of preserving the annual tradition, despite previous offers from development firms to buy the property. The Dallas City Council accepted it, thanks to the efforts to introduce legislation 2 years earlier. A national park movement developed as the new century arrived and made its way to Dallas in 1901, thanks to the efforts of Gilbert Irish. Born in Wisconsin, he worked as a printer while attending the University of Nebraska. Gilbert graduated with a law degree and moved to Dallas 2 years later in 1894. He practiced law, building up a strong reputation and volunteering his printer skills for the local labor unions. He also publicly advocated building more city parks and brought the issue to the forefront. The Dallas Morning News followed suit by publishing stories and editorials about parks and their necessity. While this was going on, lobbyists, organizations, and interest groups joined forces with some councilmen to apply pressure to do something about the matter. Progress was made when Gilbert Irish became an alderman in 1902. Taking advantage of his new position, he passed a resolution for the creation of the Joint Committees on Parks and Driveways. It would focus on formulating a plan for constructing new roads and building additional parks before land got too expensive. While the members conducted research on the economic viability of acquiring land for the various projects, they came to the conclusion that the only way to get funds would be through a bond election and park tax. After a public vote to place the matter on the next ballot succeeded, the committees announced that the park tax would come in the form of a property tax increase amounting to 1/10 cent. The Joint Committees promoted the measure with the help of Gilbert Irish, the Commerce Club, and members of the park movement. Irish led the charge, claiming that parks would prevent crime, improve health, develop civic pride, provide inexpensive amusement, and remain a profitable asset. These arguments were echoed throughout the entire campaign until Election Day. The measure suffered a narrow defeat. Though it never became evident, the park tax campaign laid the foundation for accepting Fair Park. The owners of the State Fair offered the fairgrounds for free on February 15, 1903. In return, the city had to construct an exposition building, perform maintenance on a regular basis, keep the grounds open to the public, host an annual fair at its own expense, and use the profits for improvement purposes. Throughout the year, the city government worked out the details with the fair owners. The two sides reached an agreement on November 24th. The city council would form a new company called the Fair Association, which would be organized with a capital stock of $125,000. The money would pay off the mortgage, construct the building, and improve the fairgrounds. Afterward, the title and interest of the property would be handed over to the government. Unfortunately, the city council dragged its feet. The members wanted to own the property, but they had no desire to pay for the Fair Association's formation because it would mean the reintroduction of a park tax. As they continued debating, the fair owners grew impatient. They made an ultimatum in 1904. The citizens would vote for a property tax, the same one proposed by the park movement. If voted down, there would be no fair park and no state fair. The election took place on April 6th. Although the measure passed by an overwhelming majority, ownership would not take place until October 7th. The council adopted a new charter a month after taking possession of Fair Park. One of the amendments called for the creation of a park board, which would be in charge of the fairgrounds and other public parks. Everything moved smoothly until the Great Depression, but the gloom dissipated with the arrival of an event that would forever change Fair Park. The nation was going through a horrible depression during the 1930s, but this didn't stop plans for a celebration of the Texas Centennial. In fact, there had been plans made as far back as 1900, when James Stephen Hogg came up with the idea commemorating the state's independence from Mexico in a speech. During the convention of the Advertising Clubs of Texas, held in the city of Corsicana, the various organizations met with the Texas Press Association. The result was the formation of the Texas Centennial Survey Committee, which would be responsible for putting together a statewide celebration. A constitutional amendment was approved in 1932 to provide funding for the occasion, setting the stage for a government-appointed group called the Texas Centennial Commission, which was formed 2 years after the amendment passed. The Commission of Control, the Advisory Board of Texas Historians, the Work Projects Administration, and the Texas Highway Department joined forces to make the statewide celebration a reality. They made buildings, monuments, statues, and grave markers. For each county, a marker was installed that provided information about the place's name and origin. A calendar was printed and circulated so potential tourists would know when all the festivities would take place during 1936. The biggest event taking place was the Texas Centennial Exposition. San Antonio, Austin, and Houston competed alongside Dallas to be the location for the exposition. In an effort to make sure that Dallas would win the contest, a group of local businessmen led by bankers R.L. Thornton, Fred Florence, and Nathan Adams formed the Texas Centennial Central Exposition Corporation. They promoted the city, emphasizing its capability of hosting the State Fair of Texas and the willingness to invest in the upcoming event. In regard to the latter point, Fair Park saw itself expand to 180 acres, and the corporation collected over $5 million in public and private funds. The city of Dallas won the battle, and Fair Park became the site. To make the project a reality, the local government received $25 million. Construction for the expo began in October 1935 under the supervision of architect George Dahl. Born in Minneapolis, his parents came from Norway as immigrants. He studied architecture at the University of Minnesota and Harvard University before spending 2 years at the American Academy in Rome, Italy. In 1926, he started working for a Dallas architectural firm called the Herbert M. Green Company. Dahl did such an impressive job. He became a partner 2 years later. In addition to his work for the exposition, he was responsible for many local projects like the Neiman Marcus Building, the Dallas Morning News Building, Old Dallas Central Library, Dallas Memorial Auditorium, and Turtle Creek Village. He also made RFK Stadium, which served as the home of the Washington Redskins football team for 35 years. Also serving as the technical director, Dahl wanted the exposition's design to reflect the themes of history, progress, and culture. For this purpose, he chose Art Deco, the most current and popular style of the time. Dahl managed to complete the project in 8 months. The park now had 50 buildings and enough space to accommodate more than 100 exhibitors and several large show productions. The Texas Centennial Exposition opened on June 6, 1936, and closed on November 29 after a successful 6-month run. It saved Dallas during the Great Depression, providing jobs and a boost to the economy. It also placed the city on the national map. Because the centennial celebration was so successful, the local government decided to host another large event at Fair Park the following year. The new project was called the Greater Texas and Pan American Exposition. Opening on June 12th, the event resembled a World's Fair because it had several countries being represented. Its theme and purpose was the celebration of Texas and the growing influence of the Pan-American civilization. This was reflected in the redecoration and renaming of the buildings left over from the Centennial Expo, in addition to the various attractions and activities offered throughout the park. Ending on October 31st, the event attracted 2 million visitors, far below the expectations of those involved. During World War II, the grounds and buildings of Fair Park were used for rationing, equipment repairing, and military training purposes. The final 2 years saw the arrival of German prisoners of war to perform work requirements during their confinement. After the war ended, the park was returned to the city for public use, and everything returned to normal. On September 25, 1986, the U.S. Department of the Interior declared Fair Park as a National Historical Landmark because it was the only intact exposition site from the Great Depression. 2 years later, the responsibility of administrating the park went to the Dallas Parks Department. Errol McCoy became president of the State Fair of Texas in 1988 and brought the concept of corporate sponsorship to the forefront in regard to the exhibits and entertainment. The majority of the park's buildings underwent some degree of remodeling or restoration from 1998 to 2003.